Stephen Curry's split from Under Armour last month looked on the surface like a clean, friendly breakup. Both sides put out careful statements, thanked each other for more than a decade of partnership, and moved on. But people who followed what really happened behind the scenes say the reality was much more complicated, and a lot of it connects directly to women's basketball, NIL deals, and how brands are choosing to invest in the next generation of stars. For WNBA and women's college basketball fans, this story isn't just about a shoe deal ending. It's about how one of the biggest names in NBA history tried to push a major company to take women's basketball as seriously as he does, and what happened when that vision didn't quite line up. A partnership that looks solid from the outside. Stephen Curry and Under Armour have been linked since 2013. At one point, that partnership was arguably the most important endorsement deal in the entire basketball shoe market. Curry left Nike, exploded into MVP status, and his signature line helped put Under Armour on the map with hoop fans in a way they'd never been before. Eventually, that relationship evolved into Curry Brand, a sub-brand under the Under Armour umbrella, designed to be his version of what the Jordan brand is to Nike. It wasn't just about signature shoes anymore. It was about a long-term legacy, youth camps, community work, and importantly, a serious commitment to women's basketball. Publicly, everything looked strong. Curry shoes kept dropping, the Curry brand logo started showing up in gyms, AAU events, and grassroots programs. There was clear talk about impacting the whole game, not just the NBA. But even as the press releases stayed positive, people close to the situation say frustrations were building in the background. The split, polite words, private tension. When Under Armour and Stephen Curry quietly went their separate ways, the official language was what you'd expect: mutual appreciation, respect, gratitude. Privately, sources described a partnership that had been fraying for years. Multiple people familiar with the discussions, all of whom spoke on condition of anonymity, said that by the time the two sides agreed to part, the decision was the product of long-running disagreements. Those tensions weren't splashed across social media, but they were felt strongly inside the room. Almost as soon as news of the split became public, a simple explanation started to circulate. Under Armour lost Caitlin Clark, that's why Curry walked. The Caitlin Clark factor, and why it's not the whole story. From a distance, that theory made sense at first. Caitlin Clark's rise at Iowa and now into the WNBA has turned her into one of the most marketable players in basketball, period, men or women. Reports about her endorsement deals, signature shoe race, and WNBA rookie impact have dominated headlines. Some early stories framed Under Armour's failure to sign Caitlin Clark as the breaking point in its relationship with Curry. There's no question that Caitlin Clark's recruitment mattered. She is a once-in-a-generation offensive talent, and any brand that lands her locks in years of visibility in both women's college basketball and the WNBA. People around Curry have acknowledged that missing out on Caitlin Clark was a frustration. But according to reporting from Soul Retriever and others with direct knowledge of the talks, that wasn't the deciding factor that broke the partnership.
The deeper issue was more personal to Curry and had been simmering for far longer, and it centers on UConn guard Azzi Fudd. Stephen Curry and Azzi Fudd, a long-running connection. If you follow women's basketball even casually, you know the name Azzi Fudd. She was one of the most hyped high school players in recent memory, a former Gatorade National Player of the Year, and a UConn star who fought through injuries to shine on the biggest stage. But before all that, before the Final Fours and the national title run, she was a teenager at Stephen Curry's SC30 Select Camp. Back in 2018, when Fudd attended Curry's camp, she was one of only 2 girls invited. That alone told you how highly he regarded her game and her potential. Curry doesn't bring players to that environment unless he believes they can be special. With Fudd, that belief ran deep. Over the years, Curry not only kept track of her progress, he actively supported her development. He brought her back, stayed in touch, and, according to multiple people involved with Curry Brand and Under Armour at the time, repeatedly pushed internally for the company to sign her. In his mind, Azzi Fudd wasn't just another endorsement target. She represented exactly the kind of women's basketball star he wanted Curry Brand to stand behind. A high-character guard with a modern skill set who could bridge college basketball and the WNBA and inspire young girls across the country. A missed signing that said a lot. Despite all the speculation on social media over the years, Azzi Fudd never actually signed with Under Armour or Curry Brand. That surprises a lot of fans because for a long time it was widely assumed she was with Curry brand in some way. She appeared around Curry's ecosystem, worked with his camp, and clearly had a strong relationship with him personally. But Soul Retriever confirmed, through both Curry's brand team and senior Under Armour executives, that Fudd was never under contract with Under Armour or Curry brand at any point. Instead, any formal connection she had was through SC30, now known as 30 Inc., which is Stephen Curry's personal business entity operating outside the Under Armour structure. In simple terms, she was connected to him, but not to the company. Behind the scenes, sources say Curry pushed for years to change that. He reportedly made the case internally again and again. Fudd was a national champion, a Gatorade Player of the Year, a Final Four star, and the championship most outstanding player in UConn's most recent title run. She had name recognition, a compelling story, and already had an organic link to him through his camp. For him, Azzi Fudd checked every box. For Under Armour, for whatever reasons they have never explained publicly, that wasn't enough to move from interest to an actual deal. Several people familiar with the conversations describe this as a genuine and ongoing frustration for Curry. It wasn't a one-time disagreement. It was a repeated no on something he considered central to the future identity of Curry brand, especially in the women's game.
For the WNBA and women's basketball audience, the details of this story touch on a lot of bigger themes. First, it shows that endorsement battles in the women's game are no longer side notes, they are central. Brands are competing for Caitlin Clark, Azzi Fudd, Paige Bookers, Juju Watkins, Angel Reese, and the next wave of college and WNBA stars the same way they chase NBA lottery picks. Second, it highlights how important it is to have powerful advocates inside the room. Stephen Curry was not casually suggesting Under Armour sign a women's player. He was strongly backing a specific athlete, one he had invested in personally since she was a teenager. When even that level of backing didn't lead to action, it raised serious questions about how aligned he and the company really were. Third, it underscores how the NIL era has changed the timeline. 10 years ago, a brand might have waited until a player went pro before building a long-term relationship. Now, if you don't get in early at the high school or freshman year level, you're often too late. For Curry, who saw Fudd up close as a high schooler, that early window was part of the frustration. He believed they had a chance to lead, not follow. The Caitlin Clark storyline is still relevant here too. When a college star generates the kind of attention Clark did at Iowa, every shoe company, apparel brand, and sponsor you can name wants a seat at the table. If Under Armour truly wanted to be known as a major player in women's basketball, not just marketing slogans, but real investment, landing either Clark or Fudd would have been a major statement. Instead, they wound up with neither. A quiet but meaningful message. People who understand Curry's mindset say the failure to sign Azzi Fudd wasn't just disappointing, it was clarifying. To him, that moment and all the moments like it over several years made it clear that his vision for what Curry brand could be in the women's game wasn't fully shared at the corporate level. He wanted the brand to elevate the players he believed in, to tell their stories, and to treat women's basketball as a primary focus, not a side project. When that didn't happen repeatedly, the frustration didn't stay tied to one name. It became part of how he viewed the relationship as a whole. By the time his deal with Under Armour ended, the polite public statements were still true on one level. There was real history and success there. But behind them, there was also this unresolved sense that the company had missed some of the most important chances to match his commitment to women's basketball. What happens next? For Curry, Fudd, and women's hoops? So where does this leave things now?
For Stephen Curry, it likely means more control over how he supports and signs women's players going forward. Through 30 Inc. and any new brand partnerships, he can structure deals in a way that puts his priorities first. If he wants to build a small but powerful roster of women's basketball athletes under his own umbrella, he now has more freedom to do that without a big corporate filter. For Azzi Fudd, it raises questions about where she lands in the endorsement space long term, especially as she continues to move through her career and toward the WNBA. She has the resume, the connection to Curry, and the visibility. Whether she ends up with a major shoe brand, an independent deal through Curry's own business, or some combination, she remains one of the most compelling endorsement prospects in women's hoops. For the wider WNBA and women's basketball landscape, this whole episode is another sign that the market is changing fast. You have NBA superstars like Curry going to bat for women's players inside corporate environments. You have NIL deals bringing college athletes into the sponsorship world years earlier than before. You have fan bases that are more engaged with WNBA storylines, rivalries, and shoe culture than ever. When a company doesn't move aggressively to align with that momentum, even when one of its most important athletes is pushing in that direction, there are consequences. Curry walking away from Under Armour isn't just about dollars and cents or signature shoe sales. For a lot of people watching closely, it's a message about what he values and what he expects from anyone who wants to put his name on their product, especially when it comes to investing in women's basketball. And that's why this story, behind the polite goodbye posts, matters so much to fans of the WNBA and women's game. It's not only about who wears which shoe, it's about who's really serious about building the future of women's basketball and who's still playing catch-up.